the impact of compounding over long periods of time is really, really tremendous. This chart shows an example if you would take $10,000, again, it doesn't matter, dollars, shekels, and you invest that money over a long period of time. So you see on the left-hand side, we have the year, 5, 10, 15, 20, going all the way to 35 years. We're not adding any additional money. We're just taking that $10,000 and we're investing it for that period of time. And then across the top is the rate of return that we are earning on our money over that period of time. Okay, so let's take the ultra conservative, and I would say even somewhat of an ignorant investor who puts the money in a short-term savings account in the bank and maybe makes 2% a year over that period of time. So you can see that that money will grow from 10,000. If they do this for 35 years, it'll get to almost double, to almost $20,000. Okay, you might say to yourself, okay, my money's doubled over 35 years. Well, so you have to think that what's the impact of inflation over that period of time, right? Inflation might be running at 3 or 3.5%, right? Here in Israel right now, inflation is running at about 3.5%. Okay, in the United States, it's very similar as well. So you're not even keeping up with inflation. So yes, you might have double the money after 35 years, but it's actually going to be worth even less than the 10,000 that you invested. Okay, let's go over to the next column, to 4%. What if you were a little bit more sophisticated and you actually locked up your money in the bank for a little bit longer, or you bought maybe a short-term government bond, or you did something where you're going to be earning 4%. So all of a sudden now, that 10,000, right, after 20 years, let's say, it'll have grown to more than twice as much money over that 20 years. Instead of 35, it'll be 22,000. And if I wait all the way the whole 35 years, so we can see that you almost will have quadrupled your money. I've only earned another 2% a year, but I went from having double my money from 20,000 to having 4 times my money. Right? So I now have 40,000. I start off with 10, right? It's 4 times my money. But if I'm a little bit more, let's call it a little bit more adventurous, I'm willing to take a little bit more risk, maybe I'll actually be able to put together a portfolio that will get me 8% a year. So look what 8% can do for you. After only 10 years, my money has actually more than doubled, right? You can calculate how fast your money is going to double by thinking of the rule of 72s. If you take any number and you divide it into 72, so let's say our example here, 10 years. If you take 10 years and you divide it into 72, that means that if you're earning 7.2%, your money will double in 10 years. Okay. The other way to think about it is if you're earning 10% a year, your money will double in 7.2 years. It's a mathematical constant, but it can give you an idea of how long it'll take for your money to double. So in this example, at 8%, my money doubles in just under 10 years. Okay. But if I actually had that 8% over a long period of time, look at the difference. All of a sudden now I'm 15 times my money. I'm almost up to $150,000 in this example. Now it's from the same $10,000 that I invested. And if I could actually get over a 10% or a 12% rate of return, which we're going to talk about ways that you could potentially get that. Oh, that's not something that I would really tell you that you should expect over a long period of time, earning 12%, right? The S&P 500 index in the United States has produced that rate of return over the last 10 or 15 years, but that's a little bit higher than what is like the norm. But if you really could get that much money, that much interest, that much earnings on a yearly basis for that long a period of time, look at what happened to that $10,000. All of a sudden now it's more than $500,000. And that is the power of compounding. Okay. Let's take another example. Okay, if it's too big a number and you don't want to think of it, it's like too hard to conceptualize. So take a look at this example. What would happen if you took $1,000 for every child or grandchild that you had, and you put it away for them, and you had it compounding at these different rates of return? You see on the top, we got the 2, 3, 6, 8, 10, and then we see what that money would actually be worth to that child at retirement. at the different rates of return. All right, so look at it. If you're at 6%, if you took that money for your child, that $1,000, and you invested it for them at 6%, by the time they got to 65, they would have $47,000. It would have grown from 1 to 47. But if I could actually earn 10% compounding, so at retirement at 65, 64.8 years, I'll actually have $500,000 from that $1,000. Right? Have you ever thought about creating perpetual wealth? So this is a simple plan to create perpetual wealth for your family. If you put away money when they're very young and you invest it, and even if you invest it even aggressively over a long period of time and they don't touch it, that's the key. They can't go into it when they're 18 and they're taking their trip around the world, or when they want to buy their first car or others. They have to keep it long-term invested. But you see what the impact is at 10%. At retirement, it's going to be $500,000. And if they actually were able to earn at 12%, so you see at 60, they actually would have over $1 million from that initial 1,000. And of course, we're more than welcome to save much more money over time, to grow our savings for our children, right? Much more than this. And I'll give you a third quick example. Okay, this one actually was like my former business partner shared this with me many years ago. Okay, it gives you an example of what's the easiest way to become a millionaire. So we have two different types of investors. Investor A on the left-hand side. So they start their plan at age 19. Okay, what they did was they saved up, and they save up every year for 8 years, $2,000 a year. And they invest it, okay, until retirement. So all they've done is they've gone on a financial diet for 8 years. They've saved during those critical years. They've saved a total of $16,000, and they invested it at 10% rate of return average until they hit 65, until they hit retirement. So they will have $1 million at retirement from that initial $16,000 investment. So that's investor A. Investor B, however, starts only 5 years later. They go to school first. They decide they're going to go on that trip around the world or do whatever they want to do. And they only start saving when they're 24, which, by the way, is not even really so old. Right? There are many people who don't start until much later. But they started at 24, and then they saved for the next 41 years that same $2,000. Okay, and then that grew over that period of time to $1 million, also compounding at 10%. Both investors have created $1 million. One of them took 8 years and was on a financial diet from 19 to 27 for 8 years. The second had to stay on a financial diet for 41 years, for the rest of their life, basically, until they retired. Okay, that's the difference that compounding and starting early can have on your long-term financial health. Okay, so you think about all these examples are just showing you the power of starting early and giving yourself enough time for your money to grow. Okay, and it also shows you another very important point, which is that if you can get, over the long run, a little bit better rate of return, the impact on your long-term savings can be dramatic. Okay, that difference between 6 versus 8 versus 10% rates of return is tremendous over the long period of time. And why do people choose to invest in the most conservative investment out there? Why do they go for the 2 or the 4% rates of return? So I think it's because of a lack of education. It's because they simply don't, they simply do not know how to invest, what's the right way to find investments, and how to do the proper due diligence, and how to even accept the right amount of risk for themselves. Right? You have to know what type of risk you can take at different times in your life with different types of savings. And we're going to talk about that as we go through the evening.